Great. So hello, everyone from CritiqueMatch. We're starting with our first webinar with Daria White, a published author and pro-critiquer. Daria has lived in Texas for most of her life. She never enjoyed reading as a kid, but as she grew up, all that changed. She has now published romance books and cozy mysteries, and also has a podcast called Writer in the Making. She has been on CritiqueMatch for a while, working with critique partners, and has distinguished her skills, and has now become a pro-critiquer offering high-level critiques, inline edits, and beta reading services. She will share her experience and tips on giving constructive but also positive feedback to critique partners. Just as a heads up, this event will be recorded, so if you're not okay with that, feel free to remove your camera and just keep the audio. And you can ask questions along the way using the chat button, and Daria will answer at the end of her presentation. So with that, Daria, go ahead.
Okay. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome. This is my first webinar, too, so this is going to be a lot of fun. But tonight's topic is how to keep an encouraging tone while giving a constructive critique. These are actually some of my favorite things to do when giving a critique, because it's just my personality anyway, that I tend to lean towards wanting to highlight the positives. So I wanted to share a little bit more about me. I know Magna went on ahead and gave a great intro. Thank you. But I also want to say thank you to CritiqueMatch for this opportunity. And I've enjoyed working with them. But my works do include not only novels, but novellas. I have a romance series, Bridgepoint Romance, that I've been working on, a few short stories and poems. These are my primary genres: sweet romance, Christian romance, fiction, and as mentioned, the cozy mystery. Like Magna said, reading actually, to be honest, was not my favorite thing, but it grew to be over time. I actually remember writing my first short story in middle school, and it was actually a mystery because I wrote about a missing teacher. So that opened the floodgates. One of my favorite desserts is chocolate. I like all types of music, so it kind of ranges. I can go from R&B to hip hop and then some gospel, contemporary. So I have a very wide playlist when it comes to music. And then just another thing about me, Turner Classic Movies. So movies that were made in 1969 and prior, I pretty much know. I could probably tell you a little bit about what's in theaters right now, but if you ask me about classics from the 1940s, 1930s, 1950s, I'm probably going to be able to tell you. And my podcast does have over 200 episodes. I actually lost count of my episodes. But those are a few of my books. My most recent release is in the bottom left corner. I also have Match Made Christmas. You'll see a lot of my releases relate to Christmas. That's my favorite holiday. But I just wanted to give a little bit more about me. And we're going to go into what we'll be discussing this evening. I will not be before you long. I believe that the tips I'm going to be sharing with you are very simple yet practical, and I believe it can be done. So, one, how to show empathy. I'll also be giving some personal examples and scenarios of things that I would say when I'm presented with something, when I'm critiquing. Tips on how best to critique positively. And of course, you guys will be asking questions later if you have any. So moving on here. So I wanted to include this because you have to remember that the writer is entrusting you with what I call their book baby. Because writing is probably the most vulnerable thing I have ever done. I can't speak for anybody else. But when you put your heart and soul into that manuscript, you want people to like it because you put your best work into it. So keep that in mind, and that's why I want to emphasize empathy, because this writer that is entrusting you with their work, they've worked hard, they've done a brave thing by putting it out there. Because I know for me, when I first started writing back in 2003, it was years before I even put any of my work out there because of that fear of rejection, not sure about people liking it. And so to put it out there again is a brave thing. So keep that in mind when you're reading through somebody else's work. So where do you start when you get a new project? I'll give you some advice on what I do. I tend to read over the document overall. So if it's a shorter work, I'll write my comments at the end. And if it's longer, I add inline comments. That way I won't have to worry about trying to go back to see, okay, where was that I wanted to point out. I just go ahead and add an inline comment there. But the first thing I do is I focus on the big picture. So I'm looking more at the crafting overall. I tend to do more of the high level critiques anyway. So I'm looking at your big picture. So did it grab my attention? No, the hook. Then I get specific with characterization, setting, pacing, plot, and dialogue. Those are the big chunks that I really tend to focus on with that there. Now, in terms of my method, you guys may be familiar with this. I like the sandwich approach when you put a negative between two positives. So trying to find the highlights of it, because 9 times out of 10, the writer just needs some redirection. This may be their first book. This may be their first mystery, romance, thriller, and they may just need someone to look at it and kind of like, okay, you're off to a good start here. Like, well, this may be happening here and then this may be happening over here. So there are ways that you can do this, and I'll give examples as we continue on. So first example, if a writer doesn't give the goal of the character or it's unfocused, I'll of course put it in my comments, but I will not say this. Your character sucks because I don't know what they want. That's not going to be received well. That is not going to be taken well at all. Instead, this is what I would say. I'm not sure what your character's goal is. Perhaps you can give some more clues to your readers by using some foreshadowing, but I can't wait to find out more! Exclamation point. So that sounds a lot better than, okay, your character have no idea what's going on. I'm thrown off. The tone, that the second option here has a better tone as opposed to the first one. So again, critique how you would want to be critiqued. Okay. Another example that I'll give would be with pacing. And for a while, even with my own writing, I had to get better at pacing because I'm really giving an example of something that I have done that someone had to help me with. Let's say the writer is quote unquote info dumping. I've been guilty of this. The information may be essential to the story, but it's mentioned too early. So again, I would point this out by saying, while I can tell this is important later, I think you can save this for another section. Focus on the present action in your current scene. Find a place where your character is triggered and then bring up some backstory. So give those suggestions to where you're not telling them to fully cut it out, because it may be important. For example, let's say your character has post-traumatic stress and they're triggered. Let's say they were in a car accident and you want to really emphasize how that car accident affected them, the trauma that they experienced, the rehab they had to go through, but you don't want all of that in your first chapter. Again, it's important. So for me, I would probably have it to where the character is driving in the car and maybe they hear tires screeching. That can trigger your character to reflect, but don't stay there too long because you don't want to take it out of what's happening right now. And I personally save backstory for maybe chapter 2. I really try to avoid it in chapter 1 because I really want to throw you into the story and throw you into the action. So give those suggestions in that scenario. And then a final example here would be with dialogue. Now, I personally love writing dialogue. It's one of my favorite things to do, especially in my romances. And I'm writing a bantering between my characters, and I get to reveal a lot of things with their characters, maybe a secret or two. So those are the questions that I ask with the writer that, let's say, for example, here, let's say it's too long. Sometimes we have a lot of fluff in our conversations with our characters. So if I'm reading that and I see, okay, this is a pretty long section. Well, here's some questions. Is there a change? Was a secret revealed? Is it a reaction scene where it's reflecting on what's happened in the previous chapter or the previous scene? Does the character grow in this conversation? If there's no purpose, it may need to be cut. I'm learning that with writing, every scene has to have a purpose. It has to have a purpose. If not, then it's just taking up space. So here, I would advise the writer by saying, I think you can cut some dialogue here. I don't think it's really adding to your story. Sometimes less is more. Or the opposite could be happening. Maybe they don't have enough dialogue. So you could say, I think you could add a little bit more here. Let's dig a little bit deeper with your character. Why are they feeling this way? Or is this intensifying conflict here? Or so there are plenty of ways that you can go with this, but I believe that in this case, the suggestion is sometimes less is more. Now, a couple of ideas here. And to be honest, I didn't even know that I was doing this. I really didn't know that it was a thing. But the first one is don't use double negatives. I personally don't do this, so I encourage you not to as well. So examples of this would be your work doesn't suck. It's not too bad. Don't think I didn't enjoy it. It sounds like it may come across as if you're trying to be nice about it, but all your recipient sees is the bad. Because it sounds like a conjunction is coming, right? Your work doesn't suck, but it's not too bad, but don't think I didn't enjoy it. But it's like that there's more to this sentence. So really try to avoid that. And then finally, adding encouragement through punctuation. Now, this is something that I personally do, using exclamation points when noting what you like can honestly propel the tone upwards. So, for example, love that plot twist. And I personally include smiley faces. So, if someone has written a scene, because one of my weaknesses that I have to work on is with settings and descriptions. So, if I'm reading someone's work and I see that they nailed that scene with the descriptions and they established the mood really well, I'm saying, wow, you sucked me into that scene. I felt the rain because you were describing a thunderstorm, or I heard the thunder, or wow, you described this park so beautifully. I felt like I was there. I heard the kids running. I heard the birds chirping. I could feel, the sweat because you were talking about your character sweating. Some writers, it's like, go ahead and give them those kudos and say, you did awesome with that. I can't wait to find out more. Wow. And if you want to be like me, throw in a smiley face or two. But really putting that emphasis there can really, really help because they're already nervous about what you're going to think anyway. So when they see that, they'll be like, okay, they actually like something. But this question was posed and it was asked again because what if it's really, really bad? Yeah, it makes me think of the first story that I ever wrote, which was in a loose leaf notebook. And I got to tell you, there was probably no character arc, no plot. I probably did a lot of head hopping where it bounced back and forth between characters in one scene, grammar, punctuation, everything. So yes, there are times when the manuscript is raw, the writer is a newbie, and you're looking at it and like, this needs some intense revisions. But I'm going to tell you what I do, okay? I would still make an effort to point out the positives. And I'll tell you why. Because again, this is a time to show empathy. And I'll give a quick example. Because my first Christmas novel that I ever wrote was called My What If Christmas Wish. I self-published it in 2013, but I did a second edition in 2018. But with my first edition in 2013, I ended up going to Goodreads. And I think I joined a small writers group, but I was asking for a review. And what I really appreciated it actually, one writer said that she would review it. And she ended up emailing me saying, thank you so much for the opportunity to read your work. I hope you're not offended, but I honestly think this manuscript needs some more work. So me being a newbie, not knowing what to do, even how to craft a story, like my degree, y'all, is in healthcare management. So I'm a self-taught writer. And a lot of us are self-taught. There are some of us that have degrees and we've been doing this for years. So it's a no-brainer for us. But for some of us, we come into the game and we're like calves at a new gate. And that was me. But I appreciated her for reaching out, and she still looked for the positives in my work. and she showed me where I could work on, and she pinpointed, okay, this scene can use a little bit more development, or yeah, your character is good, but I think they sound a little too good to be true. What's their flaw? What's their backstory? What is something that they struggle with? I didn't know any of those things, but because she did that, it made the script, the manuscript, that much better. So that's what I do for other writers, because somebody did it for me. So yes, tell the truth. I'm not telling you to sugarcoat anything. I'm not telling you to lie to them, but don't crush the writer's dream. Because for a lot of us, this is something that we've always wanted to do. And maybe nobody believed in us. Maybe somebody thought it was a waste of time. But the fact of the matter is that they're putting their work out there. They're entrusting you with it. And we all start somewhere. So when I see somebody's work and it's like, okay, this needs some work, I remember my first book. So I take the time and I show them how they can best improve it. So as I close out my notes before I send it back to the writer, this is something that I want to point out. I reemphasize to them that all of my suggestions are strictly my opinion. This is not me trying to push my agenda onto their book. This is their work. So they are the writer and they make the executive decision on what they'll keep and what they'll leave out. I'm just another pair of eyes. So they're more than welcome to seek somebody else's advice. So I keep that in mind and I remain objective, which is the point that I really want to emphasize there. Because there have been books that I have read and I gave a suggestion that I thought would really work. But then the writer was like, yeah, but I think I'm going to go in this direction. I can't take that to heart because it's not my story. It's not my story. So again, you can give your suggestions. You can show them how to improve it. But at the end of the day, it's their decision. They know their characters better than you. They know the heart of the story better than you. You're just from the outside looking in. So I wanted to include that because there have been times when people have critiqued my work and somebody in, I can't remember, I think it was my book, Wish for Love, but I got a critique back and I loved their notes, but what they were telling me and suggesting what I should do with it, I was like, thank you. But in my mind, I didn't write them and tell them this. I was like, that's really not my character. I mean, what they were suggesting was that would have been like a total rewrite, but I knew the heart of the character. Because, yeah, there are times where you may need to cut some words. I had to cut about 9,000 words for my most recent release, The Wedding Report, because it made it stronger. But if you know that at the heart of your story, that that's not what it is, then you don't necessarily have to take the advice from that person. So remember that they may not take your advice because they know the story better than you do. But at the end of the day, I believe that it is all about writers helping writers. I am so grateful to the writing community. I told you guys a story about the writer that helped me with my first Christmas release, and the writing community has really made an impact to where I've learned so much. Again, being self-taught, I'm very, very grateful. So look at this as an opportunity when you're critiquing to help someone else. And at the same time, I believe it sharpens your skills because this has definitely sharpened my skills. I'm a better writer as I critique, and I can pinpoint my own mistakes easier because I've applied those skills with someone else's work. And I actually had to self edit my most recent release, The Wedding Report. And I wasn't sure about it, but I had to do what I had to do. And so far, it is my most popular, and people love it. So I've learned a lot just by helping other writers, and it in turn has made me a better writer. So it's still a win win. So just know that you're helping. So I told you I wouldn't be before you long. I really think that these tips are simple and practical for you all to implement in your critiques, and just tips that you can use when you're reading somebody else's work. Remember that, again, they're doing a brave thing by letting you read their work. It is a very vulnerable place to be, and try to find the highlights. But I wanted to go ahead and include this. This is my profile on CritiqueMatch, my pro critique profile here. So you can see my services. If you like to work with me and you want to see if we're a good fit together and I can work on your book for you, my services include beta reading, inline comments, and my favorites, high level critique. So you'll get help with pacing, point of view, dialogue, head hopping. Yeah, I'm I'm definitely able to help you with that. And you can check out my samples, my reviews, and see what others have to say. So I believe we're up to the Q&A. So I don't know if you guys have any questions. Maybe something wasn't made clear.
That's great, Daria. I see we have one question from Emily.
Okay.
Do you recommend critiquing someone who is more skilled or less skilled than yourself?
Ooh, that's a good one. Well, to be honest, I don't really think it matters because they may be more skilled than you, but you may point out some things that they haven't seen with their own work because we're too close to our manuscripts to where, we can't see what may be missing. And I actually have a critique partner that, in my opinion, she's a better writer than me because she's just, I don't know how she does it, but she still asks me to read over her work, and I'm honored and I point out what I see. So I don't take it for me to feel inadequate if I feel like, well, they may know more than me. You may see something that they completely overlooked. And the fact that you take the time to point it out to them, you're like, wow, I did not see that. So if they ask you, I would go for it and just be honest with what you see and give them those suggestions and see what they say. Because you never know. They may surprise you like, wow, thank you so much.
Great. That's a really good answer. I do have one question.
Okay.
What is the hardest part of writing Christmas books?
Well, honestly, I don't think I personally have had trouble writing a Christmas book. I think for me, it's the timing when it comes to releasing it. Because I can never quite pick a date that I think fits to release a Christmas book. Some people say release during Christmas, but I haven't personally had success with that. So sometimes I'll release a Christmas book in early October or late November. And recently, I found most success with releasing a Christmas book for Christmas in July. That has really surprised me. But I personally haven't had a problem writing a Christmas book. Well, something does come to mind. I think probably since I tend to write more about small town Christmases and traditions, finding unique Christmas traditions. So I do have to research. I think the one thing that I found for my most recent release, Christmas Therapy, was a twinkle tunnel. And it basically is just a stream of lights that you can walk through. And I didn't know that that was even a thing. I'm like, a twinkle tunnel, okay. So finding unique things to implement in the story that reads like, wow, like they have those Christmas traditions. So
That's great. I don't know if anybody else has a question. You can use the chat. I haven't seen anything else come in, but nonetheless, this was great. Thank you so much for your time, Daria. These were great tips for many writers and critique partners. I know I personally took a ton of notes because staying positive is really not my strong suit. I head straight for the constructive part.
yes.
So these are really good tips to try to stay positive and upbeat because it matters, as you said.
Yes. Well, thank you for the opportunity. I love working with CritiqueMatch. Again, this has been a game changer because I really was not involved in the writing community when I first started. So the fact that I can be around other writers and we can help each other, it's made a difference with my work. So thank you all for the opportunity.
Perfect. Thank you and have a good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone. Thank you for coming. I appreciate it.